We're journeying back, way back, to a time before time itself, to witness the explosive and dramatic birth of the cosmos, according to the ancient Greeks. This isn't just a story. It's the foundation of everything we know about gods and heroes. This is part 1, the beginning of all things. So picture this. Before the sun, before the stars, before you and me, there was only chaos. Now, don't think of chaos as just a big mess. It was a formless, gaping void of vast, dark, silent emptiness. It's from this nothingness that everything begins. From the swirling mists of chaos, the very first beings, the primordial gods, began to emerge. The most important of these was Gaia, the earth. Imagine her, literally the ground beneath our feet, rising up from the void. She was the Great Mother, the foundation of all life. And as she looked up, another being formed. Uranus, the starry sky, stretching out to cover her completely. Together, they were the first divine couple, a perfect, unbroken embrace of earth and sky. But Gaia and Uranus were not alone for long. Their union gave birth to the first generation of gods, the 12 Titans. These weren't your average deities. They were beings of immense power, personifications of the great forces of nature. There was Oceanus, the world-encircling river; Hyperion, the lord of light; Themis, the embodiment of divine law and order. And among them was the youngest, most ambitious of all, Cronus. Now, Uranus was a complicated father. He loved Gaia, but he was terrified by the power of his children. Besides the Titans, Gaia also gave birth to monstrous beings, the 3 Cyclopes, one-eyed giants who were master craftsmen, and the 3 Hecatonchires, monsters with 100 hands and 50 heads. Uranus was so repulsed and frightened by them that he did something truly terrible. He took these children and thrust them back into the womb of Gaia, deep within the earth, causing her immense pain and sorrow. Gaia's love for her children turned into a burning rage against her husband. Trapped and in agony, she devised a plan for revenge. She fashioned a great sickle made of the hardest flint and gathered her Titan children. She pleaded with them, "My children, your father is a tyrant. Will one of you dare to punish him for his wickedness?" Most of the Titans were silent, paralyzed by fear of their powerful father. But one stepped forward. It was Cronus, the youngest, the one who had always resented his father's dominance. He took the sickle from his mother and said, "Mother, I will do this." That night, as Uranus descended to embrace Gaia, Cronus lay in ambush. He seized his father, and with one swift motion of the great sickle, he committed the first act of cosmic betrayal. He severed Uranus from Gaia, forever separating the sky from the earth. The age of Uranus was over. From this violent act, more life sprang forth. The drops of blood that fell upon the earth gave rise to the giants and the Furies, spirits of vengeance. And where the severed parts of Uranus were cast into the sea, a white foam gathered, and from that foam emerged the most beautiful of all the gods, Aphrodite, the goddess of love. It's a powerful idea, isn't it? That from an act of such violence, beauty itself was born. With Uranus overthrown, a new king was needed to rule the universe. Cronus, the liberator, the one who had dared to challenge his father, seized the throne. He freed his Titan brothers and sisters from their imprisonment, and together they established a new world order. The Titans became the new divine rulers, and the period of their reign is often called the Golden Age, a time of prosperity and peace under the firm hand of their new king Cronus. But there's a dark irony here. Cronus had been warned by his dying father of a chilling prophecy. Just as he had overthrown his own father, so too would he be overthrown by one of his own children. This prophecy would haunt Cronus, turning the liberator into a tyrant far more paranoid and cruel than Uranus had ever been. The new king, consumed by fear, would do anything to keep his power. The Golden Age was built on a foundation of betrayal, and it carried within it the seeds of its own destruction. The story of the gods is a cycle, and Cronus had just set the next, even more dramatic, turn of the wheel in motion. How will he try to cheat fate, and who will be the child destined to challenge him? That, my friends, is a story for our next episode. We've just scratched the surface of this epic saga, and the most famous gods, the Olympians, haven't even been born yet. Their story, born from Cronus's fear, will shape the world in ways no one could have imagined. We witnessed the dramatic rise of the Titans, led by the ambitious Cronus, who overthrew his own father, Uranus. But as we know, history, especially in mythology, has a funny way of repeating itself. Today, we dive into the epic saga of how the Titans met their match, the rise of the Olympians. Our story begins with Cronus, the new king of the cosmos. He and his sister wife Rhea began to have children, the first generation of what would become the Olympian gods. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon were all born to the ruling couple. But Cronus was haunted by the same prophecy that had driven his own father to cruelty. A prophecy foretold that he, too, would be overthrown by one of his children. Paralyzed by fear, Cronus devised a horrifying plan. As each child was born, he would take the infant and swallow them whole, imprisoning them within his own body. Imagine Rhea's despair, forced to watch her husband consume their children one by one. She was heartbroken, but also growing defiant. When their sixth child was due, Rhea was determined that this one would be saved. She secretly traveled to the island of Crete and gave birth to a son, whom she named Zeus. She entrusted the infant to the care of nymphs and a goat named Amalthea, who would nurse him. To trick Cronus, Rhea wrapped a large stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to her husband. Blinded by his paranoia, Cronus didn't even look closely. He swallowed the stone, believing he had once again thwarted fate. Meanwhile, far away on Mount Ida in Crete, the baby Zeus grew up, hidden and protected, maturing into a powerful and clever young god, all the while ignorant of his true parentage and destiny. As Zeus grew into manhood, the truth of his family's fate was revealed to him. Fueled by a desire for justice and vengeance for his swallowed siblings, he knew he had to confront his father. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed an army, and that army was currently trapped inside Cronus. With the help of Medusa, the Titaness of wisdom, Zeus concocted a plan. He disguised himself and served Cronus a special mixture of wine and mustard. The potent potion worked exactly as planned. It made Cronus violently ill, forcing him to regurgitate everything he had ever swallowed. First came the stone, which he had swallowed in place of Zeus. This stone, later known as the Olympus, was placed at Delphi, marking it as the center of the world. Then, one by one, out came his children, now fully grown and powerful gods in their own right: Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. Imagine their confusion, and then their gratitude, as they were freed from their bizarre prison by their younger brother, a brother they had never known. United at last, these 6 siblings stood together, ready to challenge the tyrannical rule of their father. The stage was set for a cosmic war that would shake the very foundations of the universe. This monumental conflict is known as the Titanomachy, the War of the Titans. It was a brutal 10-year struggle that pitted the new generation of gods, the Olympians, against Cronus and most of his fellow Titans. The Olympians made their base on Mount Olympus, while the Titans fought from their stronghold on Mount Othrys. The battles were cataclysmic. Mountains were torn from their roots and hurled as weapons. The earth shook, the seas boiled, and the sky thundered with the clash of divine powers. For a decade, neither side could gain a decisive advantage. The universe hung in the balance, trapped in a seemingly endless stalemate. Seeing that brute force alone wasn't enough, Zeus sought allies. He remembered the stories of other beings imprisoned by the old regime. He descended into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, where his grandfather Uranus had imprisoned the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed giants. Zeus freed them from their chains, and in gratitude, they pledged their allegiance to the Olympians. The Cyclopes, master craftsmen, forged incredible weapons for the gods. For Zeus, they created the thunderbolt, a weapon of immense power. For Poseidon, they crafted the trident, which could shake the earth and command the seas. And for Hades, they made the helm of darkness, which granted its wearer invisibility. With these new weapons and the might of the 100-handers on their side, the tide of the war turned dramatically. The Hecatonchires, with their immense strength, hurled hundreds of boulders at the Titans at once, overwhelming their defenses. Poseidon used his trident to cause devastating earthquakes, shaking the Titans' mountain fortress. Hades, cloaked in his helm of darkness, moved unseen, stealing the Titans' weapons and sowing chaos and confusion in their ranks. And leading the charge was Zeus, unleashing the full, terrifying power of his thunderbolts from the sky. The combined might of the Olympians and their new allies was simply too much for the Titans to withstand. After 10 long years of war, the Olympians were finally victorious. Cronus and the male Titans who fought against them were overthrown. But what do you do with immortal beings who cannot be killed? Zeus chose imprisonment. He cast the defeated Titans down into Tartarus, the same deep abyss where they had once been prisoners themselves. And he set the 100-handers to stand guard at the bronze gates, ensuring they would never again threaten the cosmos. However, not all Titans were punished. Those who had remained neutral or had sided with the Olympians, like Prometheus and Themis, were spared. Atlas, a powerful Titan general, was given a special punishment. He was forced to stand at the western edge of the earth and hold the sky upon his shoulders for all eternity. With the Titans defeated and imprisoned, the reign of the Olympians began. The victorious siblings now had to decide how to rule the vast cosmos they had won. They decided to divide the world into 3 major domains, and to do so fairly, they drew lots. Zeus, as the leader of the rebellion and the most powerful, drew the longest lot. He became the undisputed king of all the gods and mortals, his domain being the sky and the heavens. He established his throne on Mount Olympus, which became the home of the gods. The second lot was drawn by Poseidon. He became the lord of the seas, oceans, and all the waters of the world. From his underwater palace, he would command the waves, stir up storms, and cause the earth to tremble with his trident. His temperament was as unpredictable as the sea itself, sometimes calm, sometimes raging. And the third and final lot fell to the eldest brother, Hades. His domain was the underworld, the vast, shadowy realm of the dead. It was a gloomy, thankless kingdom, but a crucial one. He became the ruler of all the souls who passed from the world of the living. Despite his somber domain, Hades was not an evil god, but a just and stern ruler of his realm, ensuring the dead remained where they belonged. The earth itself, Gaia, was left open to all the gods. And so, the new order was established. The chaotic and often brutal reign of the Titans was over, replaced by the structured, if often dramatic, rule of the Olympians. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the 3 powerful brothers, now governed the cosmos, each with their own domain, power, and personality. This division of power would shape all the myths and legends to come, setting the stage for the countless stories of heroes, monsters, and divine intervention that make Greek mythology so captivating. The rise of the Olympians is a truly foundational story, and we'll see its consequences play out in all our episodes. We saw the dramatic overthrow of the Titans. Now, with the old order gone, a new one rises from the ashes of war. High above the mortal realm, on the cloud-shrouded peak of Mount Olympus, Zeus and his siblings established their magnificent court. This isn't just a home. It's the center of the cosmos, the seat of power for the new pantheon of gods who will rule over humanity for ages to come, the Olympians. Imagine a palace of gleaming gold and polished bronze, built by the master craftsman Hephaestus himself. Here, the gods feast on ambrosia and drink nectar, the food and wine that grant them immortality. From these celestial halls, they watch over the world, meddling in mortal affairs, loving, fighting, and shaping the destiny of heroes and civilizations. Today, we're going to meet the core members of this divine and often dysfunctional family, the 12 great Olympians. At the head of the table sits Zeus, king of the gods and ruler of the sky. We've met him before, but now he wields the Master Thunderbolt, a symbol of his ultimate authority. He's the upholder of justice, law, and order, but he's also famous for his wandering eye and countless love affairs, which cause no end of trouble. He's a complex figure, a powerful king, a dispenser of justice, and a deeply flawed patriarch. Beside him, in a throne of ivory and gold, sits his wife and sister, Hera. As queen of the gods, she is the goddess of marriage, women, and childbirth. She is majestic, regal, and fiercely protective of her status and the sanctity of marriage. Unfortunately for her, being married to Zeus means she spends a lot of her time in a state of righteous fury, often taking her anger out on his lovers and their unfortunate children. Her symbol is the peacock, its thousand-eyed tail a reminder of her vigilance. Next, we have Zeus's siblings, who share dominion over the world. We've already met Poseidon, the mighty ruler of the seas, and Hades, the somber king of the underworld. Although Hades is one of the big three, he doesn't live on Olympus and is therefore not always counted among the 12 Olympians. But we can't forget Hestia, the eldest sister, goddess of the hearth and home. She is the gentlest of the gods, a calming presence who represents the fire at the center of every household. She is so vital, yet so humble, that she eventually gives up her seat on the Olympian Council to make way for a newcomer. But her sacred fire continues to burn in every home and temple. The final sibling is Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and agriculture. She is the one who makes the crops grow, who nourishes the earth, and who feels the turning of the seasons in her very soul. Her love for her daughter, Persephone, is so powerful it literally changes the world, a story we'll explore in detail later. Now, let's turn to Zeus's children, a generation of gods who are just as powerful and even more specialized in their domains. Perhaps the most remarkable of them all is Athena. She wasn't born in the usual way. She sprang fully grown and clad in armor from Zeus's head. This unique birth explains her domain. She is the goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, and civilization. Unlike her half-brother Ares, she doesn't revel in bloodshed, but in the clever tactics that win a war. She is the patron of heroes, the giver of the olive tree to the city that now bears her name, Athens, and a brilliant weaver and craftswoman. Her symbols are the owl, for wisdom, and the olive branch, for peace. Then there is Apollo, the golden boy of Olympus. He is the god of so many things: the sun, music, poetry, prophecy, medicine, and archery. He drives the sun chariot across the sky each day, filling the world with light. He's a master of the lyre, his music so beautiful it could soothe the wildest beasts. He is also the voice of the oracle at Delphi, revealing cryptic prophecies that shape the future. Apollo embodies order, reason, and the shining light of civilization. He is the perfect, radiant ideal of a young god. But where there is light, there must be shadow. And where there is a sun god, there must be a moon goddess. Apollo's twin sister is Artemis, the eternal maiden and goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, wild animals, and the moon. While her brother represents the civilized city, Artemis belongs to the untamed forests and mountains. She is a fierce protector of young girls and a deadly archer who roams the wilderness with her band of huntress nymphs. She values her independence above all else and is a powerful, untamable force of nature. Approach her woods uninvited, and you might find yourself on the wrong end of a silver arrow. Now, for a god who is the complete opposite of the strategic Athena. Meet Ares, the god of war. But not the clever, tactical side of war. Ares represents the brutal, chaotic, bloodlusting frenzy of battle. He's impulsive, aggressive, and frankly, not very popular with the other gods, including his own father, Zeus. While Athena is respected, Ares is often feared and disliked. He thrives on conflict and is more about raw violence than glorious victory. His symbols are the spear, the helmet, and the vulture, a bird that feasts on the fallen. And what would Olympus be without love? That brings us to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. Her origin is one of the most dramatic stories. Some say she was born from the sea foam, created when the Titan Uranus was overthrown. She is impossibly beautiful, captivating the hearts of both gods and mortals. She possesses a magical girdle that makes anyone she wishes fall hopelessly in love with her. But her domain is not just sweet romance. It also includes desire, passion, and the irresistible force that drives all living things to reproduce. She is a force of nature in her own right, both creative and destructive. And there you have them, a brief introduction to the major players on Mount Olympus. From Zeus's thunderous rule to Aphrodite's captivating charm, from Athena's sharp intellect to Ares's brute force, these gods are a complex tapestry of power, passion, and personality. They are not distant, perfect beings. They are vibrant characters with virtues and vices that mirror our own, just on a much, much grander scale. Their stories, their conflicts, and their interactions with humanity form the very heart of Greek mythology. In our upcoming videos, we'll dive deeper into the individual tales of each of these Olympians, exploring their famous myths, their epic rivalries, and the profound impact they had on the ancient world. You won't want to miss it. We've explored the cosmic birth of the universe, witnessed the clash of the Titans, and seen the Olympian gods rise to power. But now, the story turns to a new, fragile, yet remarkable creation, humanity. This is the age of humanity, a tale of defiance, punishment, and enduring hope. Our story begins after the great war between the gods and the Titans. With the world now settled under the rule of Zeus, a new task was at hand, populating the earth with mortal beings. This grand project was assigned to two Titan brothers, Prometheus and Epimetheus. Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, enthusiastically went to work, bestowing upon the animals all the wonderful gifts he could think of: fur for warmth, claws for defense, wings for flight. He gave away speed, strength, and cunning, but in his haste, he completely forgot about the final creation. When Prometheus, whose name means forethought, came to inspect his brother's work, he found humanity naked, helpless, and shivering. Unlike the animals, they had no natural defenses against the cold or predators. A deep sense of pity and a surprising surge of affection filled Prometheus's heart. He saw in these vulnerable beings a spark, a potential for greatness that surpassed any beast of the field. He loved them, and he couldn't bear to see them perish. Prometheus knew what humanity needed. They needed a tool, a weapon, a source of warmth and light that would allow them to forge their own destiny. They needed fire. But fire was a sacred privilege of the gods, fiercely guarded on Mount Olympus. To give it to mortals was a direct act of defiance against Zeus himself. Torn between his loyalty to the gods and his love for his creation, Prometheus made a choice that would change the course of history. Under the cover of darkness, he crept up the slopes of Mount Olympus. He snuck into the workshop of Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, and stole a single glowing ember, concealing it within the hollow stalk of a fennel plant. He raced back down to earth and presented this incredible gift to the wide-eyed mortals. With fire, humanity learned to cook their food, to forge tools and weapons, to light up the night, and to gather in communities, sharing stories and knowledge. They began to build, to create, to think. Civilization was born from this single spark. But this act of compassion was seen as an act of rebellion by the king of the gods. Zeus was utterly enraged. How dare a Titan empower these insignificant creatures? He saw the gift of fire not as an act of kindness, but as a challenge to divine authority. His punishment for Prometheus would be swift, brutal, and eternal. Zeus had Prometheus seized and dragged to the remote Caucasus Mountains. There, he was chained to a great rock, exposed to the blistering sun and freezing winds. But the physical torment didn't end there. Every single day, a giant eagle, an emblem of Zeus himself, would fly down and feast upon Prometheus's liver. And because he was an immortal Titan, his liver would regenerate overnight, only for the horrific cycle to repeat the very next day. It was a punishment designed for maximum suffering, a perpetual agony for his love of humankind. But Zeus's vengeance wasn't reserved for Prometheus alone. He felt that humanity, the recipients of the stolen gift, also needed to be taught a lesson. They needed to be reminded of their place and the dangers of possessing divine knowledge. So Zeus conceived a new, more subtle form of punishment. He commanded Hephaestus to sculpt a being of breathtaking beauty from clay and water. Athena breathed life into her and taught her the arts of weaving. Aphrodite bestowed upon her irresistible charm, and Hermes gave her a cunning and deceitful heart. They named her Pandora, meaning all gifted, because each of the gods had given her a unique and sometimes dangerous quality. Zeus presented this exquisite creation, the very first woman, to Prometheus's slow-witted brother, Epimetheus. Despite Prometheus's earlier warnings never to accept a gift from Zeus, Epimetheus was completely enchanted by Pandora's beauty and welcomed her with open arms. As a wedding gift, Zeus sent along a beautifully ornate box, or in some versions, a jar, with one strict instruction. It was never, ever to be opened. Pandora lived in happiness with Epimetheus, but the mysterious box preyed on her mind. The gods had gifted her with a powerful sense of curiosity, and the sealed container was an unbearable temptation. What treasures could be inside? What secrets did it hold? Day after day, she would circle it, run her hands over its intricate carvings, and wonder. She fought the urge, but her divinely implanted curiosity was too strong to resist. Finally, one day, she could bear it no longer. When Epimetheus was away, she carefully lifted the heavy lid, just to peek inside. In that instant, a terrifying swarm of dark, winged spirits burst forth from the box and scattered across the globe. These were all the evils of the world, which the gods had locked away. Sickness, death, sorrow, envy, greed, war, and pain were released upon an unsuspecting humanity. The golden age of blissful ignorance was over. Life became a struggle, filled with hardship and suffering, all because of one moment of curiosity. Terrified by what she had unleashed, Pandora quickly slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. All the evils were already loose. As she sat weeping beside the box, she heard a tiny, faint voice fluttering from within. Hesitantly, she lifted the lid one last time. Out flew a single delicate spirit, brighter than the others. It did not fly far, but lingered, offering comfort. This last spirit was Olympus, the spirit of hope. And so, while humanity would now have to face all the miseries of the world, they were not left in complete despair. In the midst of all the suffering and hardship, unleashed by Pandora's curiosity, they had hope. Hope was the one thing left inside the box, the final gift to help mortals endure the evils that surrounded them. It was the belief that even in the darkest of times, things could get better. It was the strength to carry on, to rebuild, to strive for a brighter future. This powerful story serves as a fascinating explanation for the complexities of the human condition. It explains why our lives are a mixture of triumph and tragedy, joy and sorrow. we have the fire of Prometheus, the spark of ingenuity and creativity that allows us to achieve incredible things. But we also have the contents of Pandora's box, the constant struggles and hardships that test our resilience. And through it all, we have hope, the enduring light that guides us through the darkness. The legacy of Prometheus and Pandora is our own story, the story of humanity itself. The tales of the Greeks are so rich with meaning, aren't they? We've explored the creation of the universe, the reign of the Titans, and the rise of the Olympian gods. Now, it's time to turn our attention to the age of heroes, a time when extraordinary mortals, often with a touch of divine blood, walked the earth and embarked on legendary quests that would echo through eternity. These weren't just any mortals. They were demigods, the children of gods and humans. This unique parentage blessed them with incredible abilities, but also burdened them with immense challenges. Their stories are tales of courage, cunning, and perseverance against impossible odds. They faced down terrifying monsters, navigated treacherous landscapes, and confronted the whims of the very gods who gave them life. Their adventures became the bedrock of Western literature, inspiring countless stories of heroism ever since. Our first hero is Perseus, a name synonymous with one of the most terrifying creatures in all of mythology, Medusa. Imagine this, a gorgon with snakes for hair, whose gaze could turn any living thing to stone. Sounds like an impossible foe, right? Not for Perseus. Guided by the gods, armed with a mirrored shield from Athena, winged sandals from Hermes, and a special sword, he embarked on his perilous mission. He cleverly used the shield's reflection to avoid Medusa's direct gaze, and in a swift and decisive moment, beheaded the monster. But his adventure didn't end there. On his journey home, he spotted the beautiful Princess Andromeda chained to a rock, about to be sacrificed to a sea monster. Without hesitation, Perseus swooped in, slew the beast, and saved the princess, becoming a hero not just for his strength, but for his valor and compassion. His story is a classic tale of good versus evil, a testament to the idea that with divine aid and human courage, even the most horrifying monsters can be overcome. Next, we travel to the grand city of Athens and meet its celebrated prince, Theseus. His legend is forever tied to the island of Crete and its dark, twisted secret, the labyrinth. Deep within this inescapable maze, designed by the brilliant inventor Daedalus, lived the Minotaur, a monstrous creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. Every 9 years, Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women as a tribute, a sacrifice to this beast. Theseus, filled with righteous anger and a desire to end his city's suffering, volunteered to be one of the tributes. He vowed to enter the labyrinth, slay the Minotaur, and return victorious. Upon arriving in Crete, he caught the eye of Princess Ariadne, who fell in love with him. She gave him a crucial gift, a ball of thread. As Theseus ventured into the dizzying corridors of the labyrinth, he unraveled the thread behind him. He found the Minotaur in the heart of the maze, and after a fierce battle, defeated the monster. Thanks to Ariadne's thread, he was able to retrace his steps and lead the other Athenians to freedom. Theseus returned to Athens a hero, liberating his people from a terrible curse, and proving that intelligence and bravery are a hero's greatest weapons. Now, let's set sail on one of the greatest sea adventures ever told, the quest of Jason and the Argonauts. Jason was a prince denied his rightful throne. To reclaim it, his usurping uncle Peleus gave him an impossible task: to journey to the distant land of Colchis and retrieve the legendary Golden Fleece. This wasn't just any treasure. It was the fleece of a magical winged ram, guarded by a fearsome, sleepless dragon. Knowing he couldn't succeed alone, Jason assembled a dream team of heroes from all over Greece. This crew, known as the Argonauts, included the mighty Hercules, the swift-footed Atalanta, and the musician Orpheus, among many others. They boarded their ship, the Argo, and set off on an epic voyage filled with incredible dangers. They battled harpies, navigated past clashing rocks, and faced sirens whose songs lured sailors to their doom. Finally, in Colchis, with the help of the sorceress Medea, Jason managed to lull the dragon to sleep and seize the golden fleece. The journey of the Argonauts is the ultimate adventure story, a powerful narrative about teamwork, perseverance, and the pursuit of a prize so mythic it seemed beyond human reach. And finally, we come to the hero of heroes, the paragon of strength and endurance, Hercules, better known by his Roman name, Hercules. The son of Zeus and a mortal woman, Hercules was gifted with superhuman strength from birth. However, this divine heritage also brought him the unending wrath of Zeus's wife, Hera. In a fit of madness induced by the goddess, Hercules committed a terrible crime. To atone for his actions, he was commanded to perform 12 seemingly impossible tasks, known as the 12 labors. These were no ordinary chores. He had to slay the Nemean lion, whose hide was impenetrable, defeat the 9-headed Hydra, which grew 2 new heads for every one that was cut off, capture the fleet-footed Cyrenian hind, and even descend into the underworld to bring back the 3-headed dog Cerberus. Each labor was designed to be his last, but with his incredible strength, unwavering determination, and occasional help from the gods, Hercules triumphed over them all. Through these trials, he not only paid for his sins, but also secured his legend. His story is one of suffering, redemption, and ultimate triumph. After a life of unparalleled struggle and heroism, Hercules was the only mortal to be granted immortality and ascend to Mount Olympus, taking his place among the gods themselves. From Perseus's cunning to Theseus's bravery, Jason's leadership, and Hercules' unmatched strength, the Age of Heroes gave us timeless archetypes that continue to shape our understanding of what it means to be a hero. Their quests were more than just monster-slaying adventures. They were profound journeys of self-discovery, redemption, and the eternal struggle to overcome the darkest parts of the world and of ourselves. Their stories are a vital part of this incredible mythological tapestry. We're diving into one of the most famous stories ever told, a saga of love, betrayal, and war that has echoed through the ages. This is the story of the Trojan War, an epic clash where gods and mortals fought side by side on the blood-soaked plains of Troy. It all began not with the declaration of war, but with a golden apple at a divine wedding. The apple was inscribed, "For the fairest," thrown by Eris, the goddess of discord, who wasn't invited to the party. As you can imagine, this caused quite a stir among the goddesses. The choice fell to 3 powerful contenders: Hera, the queen of the gods; Athena, the goddess of wisdom; and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. To settle the dispute, Zeus appointed a mortal judge, a young prince of Troy named Paris. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised him power, control over all of Asia. Athena offered him wisdom and glory in battle. But Aphrodite's offer was the one he couldn't refuse, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, perhaps unsurprisingly, chose Aphrodite. He awarded her the golden apple, and in doing so, sealed the fate of his city. So, who was this most beautiful woman? Her name was Helen, and she was the queen of Sparta, already married to King Menelaus. But a promise from a goddess is a powerful thing. When Paris visited Sparta on a diplomatic mission, Aphrodite made Helen fall madly in love with him. Together, they fled across the Aegean Sea, back to the mighty city of Troy. Paris had his prize, but he had also committed a grave insult against a powerful Greek king. When Menelaus discovered his wife was gone, he was consumed by rage. He went to his brother, Agamemnon, the High King of Mycenae, the most powerful ruler in Greece. They invoked an old oath, sworn by all of Helen's former suitors, to defend her honor and her marriage. A call to arms went out across all the Greek kingdoms. An unprecedented alliance was formed, a massive army gathered, and a fleet of 1,000 ships was launched. Their destination, the impenetrable city of Troy. Their mission, to bring Helen back and to burn Troy to the ground. The 10-year siege was about to begin. For a decade, the Greeks camped outside the towering walls of Troy. The war wasn't a constant, raging battle, but a long, grueling stalemate, punctuated by brutal skirmishes, duels, and raids. The city, protected by its legendary walls, seemed invincible. Inside, the Trojans, led by their wise King Priam and his valiant sons, defended their home with fierce determination. This war became the ultimate stage for heroes whose names would become legend. On the Greek side, there was the mighty Agamemnon, the clever Odysseus, the giant Ajax, and of course, their greatest warrior, Achilles. Achilles was the son of a goddess Thetis, who had dipped him in the magical river Styx as a baby, making him almost invincible. His only weakness was the heels she held him by. He was a force of nature on the battlefield, swift, deadly, and driven by a thirst for eternal glory. Fighting for the Trojans was their own champion, the noble Prince Hector. He was King Priam's eldest son, a devoted husband and father, and the commander of the Trojan army. Unlike Achilles, who fought for personal fame, Hector fought for his family, his people, and his beloved city. He was a man of honor and duty, respected even by his enemies. The clash between these two titans, Achilles and Hector, would become the centerpiece of the entire war. But this wasn't just a human conflict. The gods of Olympus were deeply invested, and they didn't just watch from above. They took sides, meddled in the affairs of mortals, and even walked the battlefield themselves. Hera and Athena, still bitter about losing the Golden Apple contest, fiercely supported the Greeks. They would divert arrows, protect their favorite heroes, and inspire courage in the Greek ranks. On the other side, Aphrodite, who had started it all, sided with the Trojans, as did Apollo, the god of prophecy and archery, and Ares, the god of war, who reveled in the bloodshed. Zeus, the king of the gods, tried to remain neutral, but was often swayed by the pleas of his divine family, tipping the scales of fate first one way, then the other. The war's most dramatic turning point came in its 10th and final year. It began with a bitter argument between Achilles and Agamemnon. Agamemnon, in his arrogance, took a captive woman, Briseis, from Achilles. Deeply insulted, Achilles withdrew from the fighting, taking his elite soldiers, the Myrmidons, with him. Without their greatest warrior, the Greeks suffered devastating losses. The Trojans, led by a triumphant Hector, pushed them all the way back to their ships, threatening to end the war once and for all. Seeing his friends on the verge of annihilation, Achilles' closest companion, Patroclus, begged him to rejoin the fight. When Achilles refused, Patroclus asked for a compromise. Let him wear Achilles' famous armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle. The sight of Achilles' armor would terrify the Trojans and give the Greeks a fighting chance. Achilles agreed, but warned him not to pursue the Trojans to the city walls. But Patroclus, caught up in the glory of battle, forgot the warning. He fought valiantly, but was ultimately slain by Hector, who stripped him of Achilles' armor. When news of Patroclus' death reached Achilles, his grief turned into a terrifying, all-consuming rage. He vowed revenge. His mother, Thetis, had the divine smith Hephaestus forge him a new set of magnificent armor. Achilles returned to the battlefield, a whirlwind of destruction. He cut through the Trojan ranks, searching for only one man, Hector. The two heroes finally met in a legendary duel outside the walls of Troy. Hector fought bravely, but he was no match for the enraged Achilles. Achilles killed Hector, and in a final act of desecration fueled by his grief, tied Hector's body to the back of his chariot and dragged it around the city walls for days. This shocking act of disrespect horrified both mortals and gods. Eventually, the aged King Priam, guided by the god Hermes, bravely snuck into the Greek camp at night to beg Achilles for his son's body. Moved by the old king's courage and grief, Achilles' rage finally cooled. He agreed, and Troy was granted a temporary truce to mourn and properly bury their fallen prince. But even with Hector gone, Troy did not fall. The city's walls held strong. The war claimed other heroes too. Achilles himself, the seemingly invincible warrior, was finally killed by Paris, of all people. Guided by the god Apollo, Paris shot an arrow that struck Achilles in his one vulnerable spot, his heel. The greatest of the Greek heroes was dead. After 10 long years, the Greeks were exhausted and demoralized. They knew they couldn't take the city by force. That's when the wily Odysseus, the master of strategy, devised a plan. It was a plan based on deception, not strength. The Greeks would pretend to give up and sail away, but they would leave behind a parting gift for the Trojans, a massive hollow wooden horse. The Trojans awoke to find the Greek camp deserted and the enormous horse standing on the beach. They were ecstatic, believing the war was finally over. Despite warnings from the priest Laocoon and the prophetess Cassandra, who cried that the horse would be their doom, the jubilant Trojans pulled the offering into their city and celebrated their victory. That night, as the city of Troy slept in a drunken stupor, the final act of the tragedy unfolded. A hidden door in the horse's belly opened, and out climbed Odysseus and a band of elite Greek warriors. They crept through the silent streets, killed the sentries, and opened the city gates. The Greek fleet, which had only pretended to leave, had sailed back under the cover of darkness. The full might of the Greek army poured into the unsuspecting city. What followed was not a battle, but a massacre. The city was sacked, looted, and burned to the ground. King Priam was killed at his own altar. The Trojan men were slaughtered, and the women and children were taken as slaves. The great city of Troy, which had stood for generations, was utterly destroyed in a single night of fire and blood. Helen was found and returned to her husband Menelaus, and the victorious Greeks finally set sail for home, their ships laden with treasure. The war was over. But the story doesn't end there. For many of the Greek heroes, the journey home was as perilous as the war itself. The gods, angered by the Greeks' brutal and sacrilegious destruction of Troy, cursed their voyages. Many were lost at sea, shipwrecked, or returned home only to find betrayal and death waiting for them. The most famous of these journeys is that of Odysseus, whose 10-year struggle to return to his kingdom of Ithaca is a whole other epic tale. And so, the Trojan War, a conflict born from divine vanity and mortal passion, concluded in absolute devastation. It remains a powerful story about glory, honor, rage, and the terrible cost of war. It shows us the heights of human heroism and the depths of our capacity for destruction, a timeless reminder of how even the grandest of ambitions can lead to ruin. The long journey home, chronicling the incredible tale of Odysseus. The Trojan War is over. The Greeks are victorious, and the heroes are heading home. But for one of them, Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, the war was just the beginning. His voyage home wasn't a simple sail across the sea. It was a grueling 10-year odyssey that would test his courage, his cunning, and his will to survive. Imagine that, a 10-year commute. It makes rush hour traffic seem like a walk in the park. Our story begins as Odysseus and his men set sail from Troy, their hearts full of hope. But the gods, particularly Poseidon, the god of the sea, had other plans. Odysseus had angered Poseidon by blinding his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, and the sea god vowed that Odysseus would suffer. This divine grudge turns his journey into a nightmare, throwing challenge after challenge in his path. One of their first and most famous encounters was with that very Cyclops, Polyphemus. Trapped in the giant's cave, Odysseus watched in horror as his men were eaten one by one. Escape seemed impossible, but Odysseus wasn't just a warrior. He was a master of strategy. Using his sharp intellect, he devised a brilliant plan. He introduced himself as No Man, or Nobody, got the Cyclops drunk on strong wine, and then, while the giant slept, he and his men drove a sharpened, fiery stake into the Cyclops' single eye. Blinded and roaring in pain, Polyphemus cried out for help. When the other Cyclopes asked who was hurting him, he screamed, "Nobody is hurting me." Confused, his brothers left him to his misery. It was a genius move. The next morning, Odysseus and his surviving men escaped by clinging to the bellies of the Cyclops' sheep as they were led out to pasture. It's this combination of brute force and brainpower that makes Odysseus such a compelling hero. He didn't just fight his way out, he outsmarted his enemy. But freedom came at a cost. As they sailed away, Odysseus, in a moment of pride, couldn't resist shouting his real name back to the shore. This act of hubris sealed his fate. Now Poseidon knew exactly who to torment for the next decade. It's a powerful lesson. Even for the greatest heroes, pride can be the deadliest of flaws. Their perilous journey continued, leading them to the island of Aea, home to the beautiful but dangerous sorceress Circe. With her magical potions, she turned Odysseus' scouting party into pigs. Just like that, his hardened warriors were grunting and snuffling in a pigsty. Only one man escaped to warn Odysseus. With help from the messenger god Hermes, Odysseus was given a magical herb that made him immune to Circe's spells. He confronted the sorceress, overpowered her, and forced her to turn his men back into humans. Instead of becoming her next victim, Odysseus became her lover, and he and his crew stayed on her island for a full year, feasting and recovering. It might seem like a strange detour, but this year of comfort was just the calm before an even greater storm. Before he could continue his journey home, Circe gave him a terrifying task. He had to travel to the underworld, the land of the dead, to seek the counsel of the blind prophet Tiresias. This was a journey from which few mortals had ever returned. In the gloomy depths of Hades, Odysseus made sacrifices and spoke with the shades of the departed. He saw his own mother, who had died of grief, waiting for him. He spoke with fallen comrades from Troy, like Achilles and Agamemnon. It was a heart-wrenching and humbling experience. But he also found the prophet Tiresias, who foretold the rest of his treacherous journey, warning him of the dangers that still lay ahead, and giving him the crucial advice he needed to navigate them. This voyage to the underworld wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a profound spiritual and emotional test, forcing Odysseus to confront mortality itself. Armed with this dark knowledge, Odysseus and his crew set sail once more. Their next trial was the Sirens, mythical creatures whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their deaths, crashing their ships upon the rocky shores. Odysseus, ever the strategist, had a plan. He ordered his men to plug their ears with beeswax so they couldn't hear the deadly melody. But he, driven by an insatiable curiosity, wanted to hear the song for himself. He had his men tie him securely to the mast of the ship, with strict orders not to release him, no matter how much he begged. As they sailed past the Sirens' island, Odysseus was tormented by their beautiful, irresistible voices promising knowledge and eternal pleasure. He struggled against his bonds, screaming to be set free, but his loyal crew, deaf to the song, only tightened the ropes. They sailed safely past, and Odysseus became one of the only men to have ever heard the Siren's song and lived to tell the tale. This episode perfectly captures his character, the burning desire for knowledge and experience, balanced by the wisdom to control his own impulses. The challenges kept coming. They had to navigate the narrow strait between Scylla, a six-headed monster who snatched sailors from their decks, and Charybdis, a monstrous whirlpool that could swallow a whole ship. It was an impossible choice, a true between a rock and a hard place situation. Following Circe's advice, Odysseus chose to sail closer to Scylla, sacrificing 6 of his men to save the rest of the ship from the certainty of Charybdis. It was a brutal, pragmatic decision that haunted him. showcasing the terrible choices a leader must sometimes make. Finally, after 10 long years of struggle, loss, and unimaginable trials, Odysseus, alone and shipwrecked, washes ashore on his home island of Ithaca. But his journey wasn't over yet. He returns in the disguise of an old beggar to find his palace overrun with arrogant suitors, all competing to marry his wife, Penelope, and claim his throne. They have been draining his kingdom's resources and plotting to kill his son, Telemachus. Penelope, a hero in her own right, has remained fiercely loyal. For years, she held the suitors at bay with her own clever trick. She promised to choose a husband once she finished weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus's elderly father. But every night, she would secretly unravel a part of what she had woven that day, endlessly delaying the decision. Her loyalty and intelligence were a perfect match for Odysseus's own. With the help of his son and a few loyal servants, Odysseus, still in disguise, sets a final trap. Penelope announces a contest. She will marry whichever suitor can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. One by one, the suitors try and fail. None of them are even strong enough to string the mighty bow. Then, the old beggar steps forward. Amid jeers and mockery, he effortlessly strings the bow, plucks the string, and sends the arrow flying true, straight through all 12 axe heads. In that moment, he throws off his disguise and reveals himself. The great hall falls silent in shock and terror. The time for reckoning had come. What followed was a swift and brutal battle. Odysseus, Telemachus, and their loyal allies locked the doors and, with the help of the goddess Athena, eliminated every last one of the disrespectful suitors, cleansing the palace and restoring order to the kingdom. But one final test remained. Penelope, cautious after so many years of deception, needed to be certain it was truly him. She tests him by ordering a servant to move their marriage bed out of the chamber. Odysseus, agitated, reveals the bed's secret. He himself had carved it from a living olive tree, its roots still anchored in the ground. It was an immovable symbol of their marriage, a secret only the two of them could know. With this, Penelope's doubts vanished as she tearfully embraced her long-lost husband. After 20 years away at war, at sea Odysseus was finally home. He was reunited with his faithful wife, his proud son, and his aging father. The king had returned, and Ithaca was whole again. The Odyssey is more than just an adventure story. It's a timeless tale about resilience, the temptations of pride, the pain of loss, and the unshakable power of hope and loyalty. It's the ultimate story of a long journey home. We enter the shadows, exploring the final and perhaps most haunting chapter, the great tragic houses. These are tales not of heroes conquering monsters, but of noble families ensnared by prophecies, curses, and the inescapable consequences of their own actions. These stories have echoed through millennia, asking profound questions about fate, free will, and the very nature of justice. Are we masters of our destiny, or merely puppets in a divine play? Prepare yourselves as we delve into the heart-wrenching sagas of the House of Thebes and the House of Atreus. Let's begin in the doomed city of Thebes, with a story so famous it has become a cornerstone of psychology and literature, the tragedy of Oedipus. It all starts with a chilling prophecy given to King Laius of Thebes, that he would be murdered by his own son. To avert this fate, Laius and his wife Jocasta do the unthinkable. When their son is born, they pierce his ankles and abandon him on a mountainside to die. But fate, as it often does in these tales, has other plans. The infant is found by a shepherd and taken to the childless king and queen of Corinth, who raise him as their own, naming him Oedipus, which means swollen foot. Oedipus grows into a clever and capable young man, unaware of his true parentage. One day, a drunkard at a feast taunts him, claiming he is not his parents' real son. Troubled, Oedipus travels to the oracle at Delphi to seek the truth. But the oracle gives him not an answer, but a new, more horrifying prophecy. He is destined to kill his father and marry his mother. Believing the king and queen of Corinth are his parents, Oedipus vows never to return, hoping to outrun his terrible fate. He decides to journey towards Thebes. On the road, at a place where three roads meet, he encounters an arrogant nobleman in a chariot who refuses to give way. A heated argument erupts into a violent fight. In a fit of rage, Oedipus strikes and kills the man at his attendance, unaware that he has just fulfilled the first part of the prophecy. The man he killed was none other than his biological father, King Laius. Continuing his journey, Oedipus arrives at the city of Thebes, which is being terrorized by a monstrous sphinx. This creature, with the body of a lion, the wings of a bird, and the head of a woman, blocks the road to the city, posing a riddle to all travelers. Those who cannot answer are devoured. The riddle of the Sphinx was this: what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? Thebes was in despair, having lost its king and now trapped by this monster. The city's regent, Creon, declared that anyone who could solve the riddle would be made king and marry the widowed queen, Jocasta. Oedipus, ever the quick thinker, confronts the Sphinx. He considers the riddle and confidently gives the answer. Man, as a baby, he crawls on all fours. As an adult, he walks on 2 legs. And in old age, he uses a cane, a 3rd leg. Defeated, the Sphinx throws herself from her cliff and perishes. Oedipus is hailed as a hero, the savior of Thebes. He is crowned king and, as promised, marries the beautiful Queen Jocasta. He has unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. For many years, they rule happily and have 4 children, 2 sons, Eteocles and Polynices, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene. Oedipus believes he has successfully escaped his destiny, but the gods are not so easily cheated. A terrible plague descends upon Thebes, bringing famine and death. The land is barren, the people are dying, and the city is in ruin. Desperate, King Oedipus sends Creon to the oracle at Delphi to learn the cause of the city's suffering. The oracle's message is clear. The plague will not end until the murderer of the former King Laius is found and exiled from Thebes. Oedipus, the righteous king, vows to find the killer and bring him to justice, ironically placing a curse upon the very man he seeks himself. He launches a relentless investigation, questioning everyone he can, including the blind prophet Tiresias. At first, Tiresias refuses to speak, knowing the catastrophic truth. But when Oedipus accuses him of being part of the plot, the enraged prophet reveals the devastating secret. You are the murderer you seek. You are the unholy defilement of this land. Oedipus, blinded by pride, refuses to believe him. He accuses Tiresias and Creon of conspiring to take his throne. But the seeds of doubt have been planted. A messenger arrives from Corinth with news that the king of Corinth has died of old age. Oedipus is relieved, thinking the prophecy is broken. But the messenger then reveals another shocking truth. Oedipus was adopted. He was the baby found on the mountain. At that moment, Jocasta understands everything. She begs Oedipus to stop his search, but he is determined to uncover the full truth of his birth. A shepherd, the very man who was supposed to leave the infant Oedipus to die, is brought before the king. With trembling words, he confirms the horrifying story. The baby he saved was the son of Laius and Jocasta. The truth crashes down upon Oedipus. He is the son of Laius and Jocasta, the murderer of his father and the husband of his mother. The prophecies have been fulfilled in every terrible detail. Rushing into the palace, he finds that Jocasta has taken her own life. In his anguish and self-loathing, Oedipus takes the golden brooch from her dress and blinds himself, crying that his eyes should never again see the light of day, nor the horrors he has caused. Blind and broken, the once great king is exiled from Thebes. a living testament to the inescapable power of fate. His story serves as a chilling warning about pride and the futility of trying to outwit the gods. Now, let us turn our gaze to another family plagued by a legacy of bloodshed, the House of Atreus. This curse begins not with a prophecy, but with a truly monstrous act. The founder, Tantalus, was a son of Zeus and a favorite of the gods. They would often dine with him, but Tantalus, in an act of supreme arrogance, decided to test their omniscience. He killed his own son, Pelops, cooked him in a stew, and served him to the gods. Most of the gods immediately recognized the horrific meal and were repulsed. Only Demeter, distracted by grief over her lost daughter Persephone, unknowingly ate a piece of Pelops' shoulder. The gods, furious at Tantalus, condemned him to an eternity of torment in the underworld. He was made to stand in a pool of water that would recede whenever he bent to drink, and under a fruit tree whose branches would lift away whenever he reached for food. He was to suffer eternal hunger and thirst. The gods then reassembled Pelops, replacing his missing shoulder with one of ivory, and brought him back to life. But the crime of Tantalus cast a long, dark shadow, a curse of kinslaying and betrayal that would haunt his descendants for generations. Pelops had two sons, Atreus and Thyestes. Their rivalry would escalate the family curse to new heights of horror. They vied for the throne of Mycenae, and Thyestes seduced Atreus' wife to help him gain power. When Atreus discovered the betrayal, his revenge was even more horrific than their grandfather's crime. He pretended to reconcile with his brother, inviting him to a great feast. But for the main course, Atreus served Thyestes the cooked flesh of his own two sons. After Thyestes had eaten his fill, Atreus revealed the ghastly truth, presenting the heads and hands of the children as proof. This abominable act, known as the Feast of Thyestes, sealed the curse. Thyestes fled, crying out for vengeance upon Atreus and all his line. The curse then passes to the next generation, to the sons of Atreus, Agamemnon and Menelaus. You'll recognize Agamemnon as the great king who led the Greek armies against Troy. But even before he sailed, the curse demanded a sacrifice. To gain favorable winds for his fleet, he was forced to sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia. This act saved the Greek campaign, but earned him the undying hatred of his wife, Clytemnestra. For the 10 long years Agamemnon was at war, Clytemnestra plotted her revenge. She took a lover, Aegisthus, the sole surviving son of the vengeful Thyestes, who had his own reasons to hate the house of Atreus. When Agamemnon finally returns from Troy, a victorious hero, he is not met with a celebration, but with a death trap. Clytemnestra greets him with false words of love, drawing him a bath to wash away the grime of war. While he is unarmed and vulnerable in the bath, she and Aegisthus strike, murdering the great king. The cycle of violence continues. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra's surviving children, Orestes and Electra, are now faced with a terrible choice. Do they allow their father's murder to go unpunished, or do they commit the equally terrible crime of matricide, killing their own mother? Driven by grief, duty, and the urgings of his sister Electra, Orestes returns to Mycenae and kills both Aegisthus and his mother, Clytemnestra. He has avenged his father, but in doing so, he has committed one of the most heinous sins in Greek culture. He is immediately pursued by the Furies, terrifying goddesses of vengeance, who torment those guilty of killing their own kin. Hounded to the brink of madness, Orestes flees across Greece, seeking purification. Finally, his journey leads him to Athens, to the temple of Athena. Here, in a climactic trial, the curse of the house of Atreus is finally put to the test. The goddess Athena presides over the first ever courtroom trial, with the Furies as the prosecutors and Apollo, who had commanded Orestes to avenge his father, as the defense. The jury of Athenian citizens is split. Athena casts the deciding vote, acquitting Orestes. She argues that the cycle of blood for blood must end and be replaced by a system of civic justice. She transforms the vengeful Furies into the kindly ones, benevolent guardians of Athens, finally breaking the generational curse. The tragic tale of the House of Atreus ends not with more murder, but with the birth of law and reason, a powerful conclusion to one of mythology's darkest sagas. From the fated steps of Oedipus to the blood-soaked halls of Atreus, these tragedies force us to confront life's most difficult questions. They show us the destructive power of pride and vengeance, and the fine line between justice and revenge. Though filled with sorrow, these stories ultimately carry a message of hope that even from the deepest darkness, a new and better way, like the dawn of justice in Athens, can emerge.